Welcome to As the Story Grows. I'm Brian Patton. This is my first time recording on my brand new audio interface, the M Audio M-Track Duo. Not a sponsor. Had to rush and get something in after my Focusrite that I've had for 13 years died unexpectedly yesterday. What a shame. Today we welcome Domenic Romeo from End Rain to the podcast. End Rain's debut, The Way of All Flesh is Decay, came out last Friday on Relapse Records. Domenic talks about growing up in Canada, moving to the US to pursue full-time touring, turning down and then later getting to join Integrity, how Gene Simmons inspired a COVID hobby that led to End Rain, and more. If you like crossover thrash, you will dig this album a lot. Make sure you like and subscribe to this podcast on your podcast platform of choice. I think we're everywhere. Come hang out with As the Story Grows on Substack. That's where you'll find the mailing list, and this week's email is a behind-the-scenes look at my freak out when my interface died right before an interview. You won't want to miss that. And come join us on Discord. We've been enjoying the return of Norman Bannon's Antimatter Zine recently. Links to both will be in the show notes. As the Story Grows is not on social media anymore. No Twitter, no Facebook, no Instagram. We've never been on TikTok. So if you want the latest and don't want to miss out on anything, make sure you subscribe and hang out on Substack, Discord, or both. Enjoy today's chat with Domenic Romeo from End Rain.
Me, I live in Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay, nice. I'm in Rockville.
Where are you located? Wow, really? Nice.
Yeah.
Just around the corner.
Yeah. Yep. That's dope.
I used to work in Rockville once.
Oh, yeah?
Years ago. Yeah, I used to work for this guitar company that tried to make a wah pedal out of a ring. So instead of controlling it with your foot, you would control it with your hand. It was one of the coolest jobs I ever had. I would just go there and play guitar like all day, every day, while they just like administered little tests and stuff. It was pretty cool. Obviously short-lived.
Yeah. That's right. What brought you down to Maryland?
I came down to Maryland in 2001 in search of touring glory. I just wanted to tour through the U.S. as much as possible. And this is kind of, life came easier than it did in Canada. To do that kind of thing up in Canada was a lot more difficult, especially at the time. Crossing into the U.S. was a nightmare. And, just anything, all the cities are far apart, and the music scene wasn't as thriving as it was down here. It's a lot better as nowadays, but I'm far too gone to consider going back at this point. But yeah, just Baltimore's close to a lot of cool places. I'm able to do a lot of cool things.
Yeah, that's right. Well, where did you grow up in Canada?
In Canada, I grew up in suburb of Toronto that was called Malton, which is a part of Mississauga. Okay. And for uninitiated, it's pretty much the neighborhood that the airport exists in. So if you find in Toronto, you would be able to walk to where the house I grew up in. From there, it would take you about 10 minutes maybe. And they would have concerts there, which is pretty cool. I saw like Suicidal Tendencies there when I was a kid. Megadeth did some pretty they would do like in the hangars, I guess, like in the convention center for bigger stuff. I know Ozzy played there with Prong. It was an interesting place to grow up for sure. Yeah, that's cool. It was really loud because it was near the airport.
Oh yeah.
No one wanted to live there. So
yeah. I guess you're far enough away from the airport in Baltimore to not relive childhood.
Yeah, I get trauma every time I hear airplanes go by, or trains. We were like smack right between a train track and the airport, so it's just a constant like barrage of unwanted sounds.
Yeah. What got you into music?
When I was a kid, music was always king over toys, over everything, And I was into records more than I was into getting toys and whatnot. And my mom had a cool record collection, as did my grandparents. So I grew up with a lot of like Italian oldies, like my grandparents' records. I would always be listening to those. Stuff like Claudio Villa or Adriano Celentano or even like Toto Cotugno, like just 70s stuff, and 60s stuff. And my mom was a huge Elvis fan, so there's a ton of Elvis records at my disposal. And then when I got old enough to start, amassing things of my own that I wanted, interest turned into like Van Halen, or like Duran Duran and Prince, whatever was popular in the early 80s. I loved Van Halen though. That was like one of my first true loves. Beatles, of course. But yeah, it's all old guy stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Is Van Halen what drew you to guitar?
No, actually it was AC/DC when I was a kid, and I saw the video for You Shook Me All Night Long for the first time. No, I'm sorry, it was Back in Black, and I was like, I heard the riff, and I'm like, I want to do this. And that's totally what made me do it, was Back in Black. And to the point I even my first guitar for years was a Gibson SG. Like, I was obsessed. AC/DC's still one of my favorite bands, but like at that point it was like church. That's all I cared about.
Yeah. What leads you from AC/DC into discovering like a punk or hardcore scene, or even metal? Like, whichever came first.
I think it was all gradual, because like with your AC/DC came interest in guitar music, which opened the door to like, the gradual progression into like your hair metal, like LA Guns and Guns N' Roses and stuff like that, which I loved, which, was also parallel with like loving stuff like Metallica and Megadeth and Anthrax and Slayer. And, just I like all guitar, all music in general, but I was really drawn to guitar music as a kid. And I think, the gateway was kind of going from Anthrax to SOD to MOD.
Yeah.
Which kind of opened to DRI, and then all of a sudden it was that world was at my disposal. All of a sudden, and Dayglow Abortions, of course, I'd remiss if I don't mention them because they're from Canada, and and then all of a sudden there was this whole other like parallel universe to the serious metal world, where it was like bands that like there was no difference between the band and the audience. It was kind of a cool, like I said, parallel universe to it, and that opened the door to like like Agnostic Front and Madball and Biohazard, which. As you just keep digging deeper, and you start finding out about your victory bands. Like your Integrity. For me, it was Integrity and Bloodlet were like my big favorites. Or the 65 bands, like being into Spaz and into all the power violence, like crustier bands like Dystopia or whatever. Just everything. It's like a big mix of. I liked it all. So it was like and to this day, it's still kind of like. I have a term I joke about, but I'm always finding about new old stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's never too late. It's cool to just like, I'm like, oh, I miss Bathory when it was actually happening, and like to go back,
Yeah.
And figure that out later on in life is pretty cool. So I think it's like kind of like the gift that keeps giving,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, even like prepping for this and looking into your history, and then I come upon Dirge and I listened to Hazing Retro, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is 100% something I would still listen to right now.
Oh, geez. Wow. That's funny. Yeah, we were that was like our high school band. Just coming out of high school, we were like really, really into like the Roadrunner era at the time, which was like a Machine Head and Fear Factory and Madball, of course Biohazard and Life of Agony. That was kind of like our big point of reference when we were doing Dirge. That was kind of before we really got like scratched the surface into like the next tier of what the underground held,
Yeah, for sure. What was the scene like there in Toronto at the time? You said like it wasn't as good in Canada if you wanted to be a touring musician, but like was there a local thriving hardcore scene?
It was wild. So like in the 90s, it was kind of lawless. There was no internet.
Yeah.
And it was like a completely different time and place. And you had, if you were tuned in, you had your Chokehold and Ignorance Never Settles world, bands like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had like your Toronto like scene, which you had your bunch of fucking goofs, and Dayglow Abortions were from Toronto, but they were there all the time, so it was almost like they were from Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
That was more of like a gutter punk, drunk punk scene, and then like I said, you had like the hardcore bands that were either suburban or came from outside of the city, and then you had like this cool like weird, because you got to remember in the 90s it was hand in hand with alternative music. It was still kind of an umbrella of alternative music and not really its own thing.
Yeah.
So for me and for my friends, a lot of like the pivotal bands were bands like Mundane and Monster Voodoo Machine or Soulstorm, which was like, Arbor, like Mundane was doing the real tribal heavy drums thing way before Sepultura Roots came out. You know, I mean, it's kind of like hidden treasures of my home country, if you will. But the cities were all really far apart, and there was no, you know, like Dirge or Day of Mourning, the band that came after Dirge, we would play out. We do Toronto, Montreal, and Quebec, and it was always great. But when we'd go out into like, you know, the real sticks and play places like Brockville, Ontario, or Granby, or like Sarnia, those were like the coolest shows. But like these places were like in the middle of nowhere, and there was no real network at the time. Whereas if you came into the U.S., you know, you were like hitting Buffalo, you're hitting Rochester, you're hitting Syracuse, and that's just in one line in New York before you know, you can cross over to Pennsylvania and go to Erie. And all of a sudden you can hit Erie and like, you know, jump to Cleveland. Like it was such a better layout by design and a better network. And back then you had to be handy with writing letters and sending tapes to everybody because that was the only real way, or calling them at home and talking to their dad because they weren't home. It was like, it was a wild time, but yeah, it was a little hard to plug that in. We made it work, you know. We managed to go across Canada from coast to coast a few times, and we kind of did everything we can do at the time. I think with the advent of the internet and things opening up, like future generations had it a lot easier, and good for them because it's amazing. It's really great to see like so many bands come out of Canada and so many things thriving now, where at the time it was like really struggling for recognition and like, you know, just like any sort of opportunity to do anything because it was such a small pool and dictated by like stuff that like was, like I said, you as a branch of the alternative tree. It's kind of like it was weird to find like your foothold and like your place in the big picture, you know?
Yeah. At what point, I mean, you've been like grinding and working on music and like in bands for so long. At what point were you like, this isn't going to happen in Canada? I need to move to the States to try to find a gig. Like what was the incident that made you be like, I got to get out of here?
It was actually right before 9/11 happened. And, you know, it was during the summer before September, obviously, that leading up to it. And Day of Mourning, which was my band at the time up in Canada, we're set to do like a full North American tour. We were going to be gone all summer. I was like really, really excited about it. And we had some member issues where at the last minute, it kind of just fell apart and didn't happen. And I was bummed. You know, I didn't want to sit in my little Ontario suburb. I wanted to see the world. And music was a great way to do that. So it was almost like divine intervention. I got an email from Rick Healy, of all people, from 25 to Life and Come and Correct fame, saying they needed a guitar player to go to Europe with them. And I was like, wow, you know what I mean? This is even better. Sure, why not? Sign me up.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just quit my job. I had $300. I had my guitar and $300 and a backpack full of clothes. That gig didn't last very long because, you know, it's a very hard gig to endure. But it got my foot in the door to do a whole lot of other things and meet other people and kind of create the path that got me to where I am here. Like, you know, we're 20 years later.
Yeah. Yeah. Was it Pulling Teeth that led you to Baltimore, or were you already in Baltimore and that's where you connected with Pulling Teeth?
Oh, no. So I came over to tour with Come and Correct at first to go to Europe with them.
Yeah.
And when I come back from that, the guys in that band, Next Step Up, had another band called Wake Up Cold that needed someone to go to Europe with them again. So for a little while, I was like a hired gun that would go to Europe with bands or just do whatever. You know, I was trying to figure things out. And by that point, I decided I wanted to do my own thing, that I was going to stay. You know, for a minute, I was going to move to Cleveland and join Integrity the first time around. And like, it would have been 2004, I think, 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was my dad, it was on the To Die For tour. And my dad ended up getting really sick, and I couldn't commit to the tour. I'm like, I might have to leave in the middle of this tour, like on a drop of a hat. So I'm gonna have to respectfully decline, as much as like it killed me to do it. But I wanted to do more. You know, back in 2003 or 4, I decided Baltimore is where I was gonna kind of like base out and do my thing. And we started Slumlords. It's a bunch of guys I worked with. We used to work at a company that would work doing evictions and dealing with abandoned houses and like the worst neighborhoods and all that stuff. And that's where I met the guys from Stout and like and whatnot. And that's where Slumlords kind of came into fruition. And we did our thing from like 2003 until 2007 or 8 was the end. And somewhere in the middle of that, you know, I like doing Slumlords, but that wasn't my preferred real, you know, bread and butter as far as the music I like playing. It's much more in the Pulling Teeth. Pulling Teeth follows the lineage of like Day of Mourning as Integrity later and even End Rain. And I decided I wanted to do a band that was going to be the band that I wanted to do, and that's how Pulling Teeth came to be. It was kind of trying to get all the go-getters from all the local bands to agree to be in the same band.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. And it worked out awesome. We got Mike from a band called The Spark. Alex was in Never Enough, and he had played in Coming Correct with me a few times, so I was friends with him. And the original bass player was Doug from Slumlords and Stout, but then we got Chris Kuhn from this band Downside Risk, who's another hard worker. And, we went through a bunch of second guitar players before we ended up with Mitch from Runer. But it was all the do-it guys from bands, and we would play 3 shows in a day sometimes, we would late show and we would manage to hit all 3 in a day. And we were it was crazy. It was awesome to be just surrounded by guys that had the same hunger and drive to do it, and yeah, that's how that came about. It came to be.
Nice. Was it just constant touring that led to your relationship with Integrity?
Well, Integrity has been my favorite band since I was a kid. Since the early days of AOL, where I used to send fan mail to the Holy Terror at AOL.com address that was in the Humanities the Devil CD, and just punish. I wanted to know everything about them,
Mm-hmm.
And with time, Day of Mourning actually recorded our last record in Cleveland, or just outside of Cleveland in Mentor, at a studio called Mars, which Integrity recorded at. And Dwid from Integrity and Human Furnace from Ringworm came out and lent some vocals to the record. Totally, some weird kid from Canada's request. It wasn't like there was any obligation or friendship that required him to do so. They just did it because I asked and because they were awesome, Yeah. And that's kind of where the friendship was formed with those guys. This would have been in 98. And, I just kept in touch with both of them. I played with Ringworm a couple times. I did a run with them in 2004 and then another one in 2014 whenever they were down a guitar player. And with Integrity, the opportunity came about in 2015 or 14. It was right after they did that big reunion with the Melnicks.
Okay.
Which was, designed to be one show, and it didn't really hold up, and they needed, they had a lineup set, and the guitar player bailed at the last minute, and I was like, I know all the songs, I'll do it. And, one show turned into almost a decade. So
wow.
It was definitely cool.
Yeah. The Wikipedia page says you're a former member, so are you no longer playing with them?
It's kind of in flux. It's
okay.
I'm not an active touring member. I don't tour.
Okay.
And it's more of a situation where if I'm needed, if someone can't make it and I can make it, then I'll do it. But nowadays, family obligations are really taking the front seat. I got 3 young kids.
Yeah.
And I'm not really keen on going anywhere or doing anything that much anymore. I like making records, so doing that kind of stuff's still cool. But Integrity still tours its ass off, even more so, I think, than when I was in the band. So they got guys now that can do it and can do it better than I could. The guitar player plays circles around me, so it's great. It's great seeing them still go, and we still talk every day. It's it's fine. It's just I just can't be there.
Let's talk about End Rain. How did this project get started?
End Rain came about during the pandemic. Integrity had just come back from Australia, and right before it hit, and then it hit hard.
Mm-hmm.
And like everybody else, I was kind of losing it. I don't know what to do. There's a lot being locked in the house with my 3 kids and my soon-to-be ex-wife at the time. This was a tough situation. And I took to writing songs every day to kind of just keep myself busy and keep myself sharp. And I remember reading an interview with Gene Simmons from Kiss where he's like, I write a song every day, even if it sucks, I see it through. And I always write songs as little mini riff songs, right? I kind of write parts. And then when it comes time to do an album, I'll find all the stuff I like and kind of sew it all together. But this was the first time I actually sat down and was like, all right, every day's got to be a song from start to finish. It's got to have a verse, a chorus, bridge, everything. I got to end the day with a complete song. Mm-hmm. And that's how it started. There was no limit on style. There was no limit on anything. It was just kind of write. And I got the idea where I'm like, I'm going to just make a mixtape of all these random songs and get my friends to sing on them because they're all stuck at home too. Why not, you know? And I just started parceling songs out to people. I'm like, hey, do you want to do this? And, you know, it came out awesome. I think like there ended up being like a good like 5 or so bands that spawned from that whole idea, you know, that I ended up writing whole records for. And
Nice.
one was End Rain. Like I sent Mike the song House of Thieves. I'm like, all right, this is your song. You know, we both love Cro-Mag's Best Wishes. And it was kind of a big nod to Cro-Mag's Best Wishes. I'm like, let's make a song that, you know, that we wish the Cro-Mag sounded like now. If we were like, you know, because they had just done that In the Beginning record. And it was very much like Age of Quarrel-y, much more like on a hardcore leaning. And you know, I'm like, man, I wish they went the Best Wishes route. Let's write a song for fun. And it came out so great, we decided let's do more songs, and that's kind of how it happened. You know, we pieced it together, and when it came time to record, I found out that Adam Jarvis actually lives like a street away from me. Right? At the time, he did. He moved since, but we're old friends. We used to work at a guitar store together in the early 2000s during the Pulling Teeth days. And I just hit him up. I'm like, hey, we always talked about doing a record. We're both not doing anything right now. You want to do a record? And he was game. So he started coming over and we just started jamming it out, you know, and then little by little, the record came together. We recorded it. And, you know, I was high off playing God. I'm like, all right, who else can I get in this band? I asked Art from Bloodlet if he wanted to play bass. And he said, sure. And next thing you know, he was in town a week later. He knew all the songs and we recorded. So boom, we had a full record, you know. And then the final touch was adding Sebastian from Exhumed and Noise him. Because he could play a lot of stuff I can't. Like I mentioned with Integrity's guitar player they have now, this kid Cody. A lot of kids are much more limber than I am. I'm old. I don't get to practice a lot. I'm always chasing kids and doing dad shit, you know. So it's like,
right, yeah.
He all the ideas I had that I couldn't do, he was able to do, like on his head. So it was like he was a perfect addition to the band. And yeah, that's how it came about. We had a record a year. It took 2 years, I think, from start to finish. But a couple years later, we had a complete record, and here it is. I think it comes out Friday.
Yeah,
it does. Comes out Friday. I don't know when this airs, but it'll be out on the 14th.
Yeah, it'll probably be out by the time this airs. So, what kind of led you to that more thrash crossover sound as opposed to like more traditional hardcore?
I think the idea was with Integrity, Howling, the last record I did with them, was really weird and out there because Dwight and I were very into this on this trip of like, let's make the weirdest record possible. Let's make it where it's like I'm on a sitar on the next. Like there's no rules, right? I mean, let's just make it the weirdest. Do whatever we want, pretty much, you know. And it was great, but that challenged me to like write a streamlined record, and I wanted to do something that was very verse chorus, much like the rules I set for my songwriting regiment during the pandemic. I wanted to make a straightforward like Rain and Blood record, you know what I mean? Where it's just like it starts, it's finished. Each song is its own little part of the puzzle, but it's all like, you know, it's like AC/DC approach to writing thrash metal, kind of, you know. And at the time, I was super, super into listening to Dokken and Bathory and Amoebics and of course Best Wishes and Master of Puppets. I was like on a huge Master of Puppets kick, and that was kind of the formula. That's kind of what kind of made the record into what it was. I listened to those records like a ton. I go through periods where I like obsess over certain things, and that's kind of like a yearbook of what I was listening to during that time. You know, it's kind of cool to see it morph into its own child.
Yeah, nice. Where'd the name for the project come from? End Rain.
You know, all the good band names come to me in my sleep. It's like I always stress over a band name, and then I have a dream, and that's the band name's in the dream, and then you know it works out. And with End Rain's case, it was an interesting situation where there was another End Rain, because I'm like, oh crap, you know. Yeah. But this End Rain broke up in like 2005, I think, or 4. So I wrote them, and I was like, hey, I have this idea of this band. I really want to do about, you know, of course, if you guys are still going, or you know, you have any claim to it that you know you don't want to let up, then I totally understand. But I figured it's worth a shot. Ended up being like the nicest dudes. They knew about Pulling Teeth and 8389, and they were like, "Oh, we're never going to reform. You can have the name. It's all good." You know. Nice. They're in a band called Geist now. Geist. I don't know how to pronounce it. I suck. But they're really good. They're from the UK. It's definitely worth checking out. I think it's Geist, like Poltergeist. I don't know, but yeah, they're fantastic. And so yeah, that's how that name came to be. It was kind of like Millennial Rain is my favorite Integrity song. So kind of was a deviation of that, you know, another kind of rain.
Yeah. What got you connected with Relapse Records?
Friendly with them for a while. I just from years of being involved with music, and of course, Integrity was on Relapse, and a lot of the 8389 bands. When I closed up shop in 2014, I ended up brokering them over to Relapse and getting them set up over there, where it was they could continue because I had an exit strategy in place way before I ended the label. I just knew I wasn't going to be able to do it anymore. Yeah. I knew my life was about to go through a lot of changes, and I needed to be fully present elsewhere than music, so I was able to do that. So I had a good rapport with them, and then I made the record and I sent the demos over to them, and I was just like, I want to do this. I'll probably do it myself unless you guys want to do it, because let's be honest, if I do it myself, it's going to be years, and I don't know, it's just not, it's not going to be as good as if you guys do it. So if you like it, let me know. And thankfully they liked it, they were like, yeah, we'll totally do it. And it was all of it came together so painlessly and seamlessly. It's just amazing in hindsight to look back and be like, whoa, it's just kind of, all the bullshit that led up to it is a different story. So maybe that's the payoff, It's like,
yeah. Who did the album artwork?
The album artwork was done in two parts. Originally, Michel Langevin from Voivod, also known as Away, was hit up to do the artwork, and he ended up doing the art that's on the inside poster or on the limited cover, depending on which version you got. Like the real, it looks like Voivod art. It's real wild and crazy, post-apocalyptic. And that was it. Moving forward, we're good to go. And Michelle Edison, who did art for Starkweather, she also played bass in the band Starkweather, and she's Mike from All Out War's wife.
Yeah.
But she posts her artwork online, and I'm a big fan, so I'm always checking it out. And when she posted the painting that ended up being the N-Rain cover, it totally connected with the exact vibe. You know what I mean? I'm like, the way artwork was awesome, and it was huge. It was one of my favorite bands. It was a huge deal, right? But I'm like, this is the cover. I saw it, and I was like, this is, it immediately resonated with kind of like. And it's funny because I've talked to her about it, and it totally wasn't her intention as an artist when she created it, but the vibe I got from it was like a life after the end of the world. It's very somber. It's like, I see it as like a bunch of green because the world's like regenerating. And there's a bunch of transparent figures because they're just life kind of it was kind of like a regeneration vibe I got from it. And that's kind of the vibe I got when I was doing the N-Rain record, because the world was so dead.
Yeah.
So, I'm so it's almost like a rebirth. So yeah, I asked Michelle if we can use the artwork, and she was gracious enough to agree, and we put the two together because there's no way the way artwork wasn't going to go in there, so we managed to find a way to make it all work.
Yeah. The Way of All Flesh is Decay. Does that title have to do with kind of an overarching theme lyrically on the album, or is it just like the most metal title you could come up with?
No, it's it's the lyrics in the first song, Desolate Fog. Yeah. But it jumped out to me because it's exactly what circling back to what I just said about the cover, where it was everything kind of I felt like everything kind of died, and it was kind of like a metamorphosis to start over and come out of the cocoon and give it another shot. And that's kind of what the whole record kind of symbolizes,
Yeah. Album is out Friday. You're not touring anymore because you got kids running around. What are your future plans? You said you had other songs, other projects come out of this. You working on other music?
Well, N-Rain's kind of has a pact where we won't play unless it's a show where all five of us can do it. We don't want to do it with four of us and a different guy.
Yeah.
Which puts a limitation, but it's a welcome limitation because everyone's busy and whatever. So if someone's like, hey, we want you to play XYZ, can you do it? And everyone can do it, then it's meant to happen. So that's great. From there, like I said, there's other bands that I did during the pandemic, and I could knock them out real quick. There was a punk band called Permanent Mistakes that we did, and we have a 7-inch coming out. It's on Speedo Wax label. It's a label in the UK, Speedo Wax Records.
Okay.
That should be out. I don't know. I'm guessing later this year. And there's another grip of songs we're gonna try to record. We have a band called Love Letter, which is trying to describe. It's best way to describe it is like a depressing Weezer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If Weezer was a bummer, it would be Love Letter. And that's almost all recorded. We recorded all the music, all the vocals are done. We just got to touch up a couple things, and then we're gonna start rolling out songs for that. And there's a bunch of ideas I have for Integrity if that comes around, or it might be something else. And then there's a whole other album. That's a band that we called Cost. I'm not sure on the name. The dream name hasn't happened yet for this band, so it's been called Cost in the meantime, which is named after one of my favorite characters in a Jay Anson novel called 666. But this is a very 1983 Aussie Rat meets Pentagram band. So it's very George Lynch, Jakey Lee music, but with like Bobby Ebling or 70s Aussie on vocals. And that whole record is completely written, demoed to the T, ready to go in the studio and record. But you know, like if the End Rain record took 2 years, this is probably going to take a year easy before it's ready to show the world. You know, I'm hoping to do a song or two just to give people a taste, but like it'll have to happen when it happens. Unfortunately, that's like the cross I've had to bear and accept, that there's just not going to happen the way I want it to anymore. It's kind of when it can happen versus when I want it to, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. With the way the internet is now, though, with like everything streaming on Spotify or Bandcamp, like even though you have Relapse doing vinyl and CD or whatever for this, like, is it helpful to like, you can scratch that creative itch and just have the music out there and not feel this pressure to tour?
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's, you know, it begs the bigger question where it's like, who's listening?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And it really like forced me to look at like, you know, being a really popular band like Integrity, where it's like everybody was listening, you know, and now it's kind of like some people are listening, and with the more, you know, obscure side pockets and avenues that you go down, it's hard. It's like dropping a needle in the middle of the ocean. You know what I mean? Some people might notice, some people might not. Some people might notice in 10 years. And couple that with getting older and being like almost 50, it's definitely like a weird field to navigate, you know, as a creative person, just figuring out how to like do stuff and why I'm doing it, and getting out of the mindset that it's because of an album cycle or a tour, and just doing it because I want to do it, you know. So settling into that mindset's been like kind of refreshing, but it's also foreign to me because I don't know, I like doing stuff and being busy, so it's weird for me to just make a record and be done and then be on to the next thing, you know.
Yeah.
But that's just the way it is, I guess.
Thanks for listening to As the Story Grows. Our intro music was written and composed by Jeremy Hunt. The As the Story Grows theme is by Bob Nana. If you like what you hear, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and give us a rating and review. If you'd like to support the show financially, you can join us at patreon.com/asthestorygrows. Be a part of our community and join the ongoing conversation over on Discord. If you enjoy this episode, share it on social media with your friends. Much appreciated, and thanks for listening.
I never thought so.